I was a hot mess in many, many different ways. I was a single mom of 4 children and extremely lost. And I think when my sister committed suicide is when I realized I need help, because I didn't want to end up like her, and I was on that path. And I went to a friend of mine and I said, I need a counselor, can you help me out? And they showed me a counseling company that lived, or their office was pretty close to my house. So I went down there and I said, I really need to see so-and-so, and they said, I'm sorry, that person's no longer taking new clients. However, we have a brand new person on staff that's a counselor, maybe you'd like to see her. And I rolled my eyes and said, fine, what's her name? They said, Pam Eckerman. And that was 20-some odd years ago. And this woman saved my life in so many ways. And I spent years in counseling. And first I said, I've got 4 messed up kids, fix them. She spent 3 years fixing me. And that, in the way that happened, the children came along. I now have 4 amazing children walking with the Lord and 12 amazing grandchildren that bombard my house every Sunday for family dinner, to my delight. So a lot has happened over the last 22 years or so. But I want to tell you, it didn't start out that way. It did not start out that way. And one of the scriptures that I heard the Lord saying to me in my spirit this morning on my way here was in Joel. In the 2nd chapter, starting at verse 24, it said, the threshing floors will be filled with grain. The vats will overflow with new wine and oil. I will repay you for the years the locusts have eaten. Amen?
Amen.
And I know from what Pastor Jim was talking about this morning, from my own experience, and when I was in the early days of coming to know the Lord and trying to get some road, some legs under myself, and trying to get some kind of pathway to life, and calling Pam constantly once our relationship in the counseling office was over with, and I'd say all these things that were going on, and Pam would always respond to me and say, well, what did the Lord say to you? What did the Lord say to you? And that was one of your questions. What are you hearing from the counsel of God today? And so finally, I'm a little thick-headed. 20 years later, I finally call Pam up nowadays and say, guess what the Lord told me? And you know what that's from? It's from sitting at his feet every day.
Yep.
There is no other solution. There's no easy fix. There's no magic wand. Sitting at his feet every day. And that's what I did, and that's what I still do. It's like a breath for me. And there's been journal after journal after journal that I have written over the years. And I went to Pam one day and in her office at the church, and I said, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. And she said, you will know. The Lord will show you. She said, what I want you to do is go home and pray, spend time with the Lord, and then bring me a vision. I said, okay, I can do that. I can do that. So I did exactly what she said, and I prayed, and she showed me the list of all the different ways you can serve at the church, and you can be an usher, you can work in the nursery, you can teach Sunday school. God bless you for doing that if they're still here. I didn't see myself doing any of that. It just wasn't a good fit for me. And so what happened was, as I was praying, the Lord reminded me of a ministry in Chicago that reached out to women on the streets that were being prostituted. And I, for whatever reason, it wasn't my story, whatever reason, I felt that's my calling. So I packed up my bags for a week or so, and I went to Chicago, and I said, can I shadow you guys? And it was frightening. I was terrified. But I did it anyway, and I went out in the streets of Chicago, in some of the really rough areas, and I met with the women, and I was with the teams there, and I was soaking everything up and learning as much as I can, and I came back to Akron, and I wrote up this great proposal, and I showed it to Pam, and I said, this is what I want to do. And she kind of looked at me like I had 2 heads. Well, okay, then let's do that. And let's see what God's going to show you. Obviously, Akron does not look like Chicago, but we started there 17 years ago, dear me, and walked the streets of Akron every Friday night. That was it. Very simple, very simple. I had a little piece of construction paper. with my name, my phone number, and a smiley face that says, Jesus loves you. That was my budget. And that's what I did every Friday night. And the women responded. The women out there responded. They had never known anybody to talk to them that didn't want anything in return. To care about them, to notice them, to look them in the eyes, and then to pray with them. It was amazing. I don't know who was in more shock and awe, them or me, but it was amazing to go out there and meet these beautiful women every Friday night. I had some great mentors at that time too, and I went to them and they said, Becky, do one thing and do it well before you do the next thing. And that's how Rahab began to grow over the years. And I'm going to introduce to you Suzanne Johnson here in just a minute, because we worked together as she was still in the Bureau. She's a Stark County resident. She's got a lot of really good information for all of you about what's going on and how God is really moving in your area to help end this fight against human trafficking in Stark County. Because I'll be the bearer of bad news, it's happening here. And we got to do something about it. And we want the church to do something about it, because as Suzanne will tell you, it's not the FBI or law enforcement. They have their part. It's the church. It's the church. And I know from the thousands of women I've met over the last 17 years, it was Jesus Christ that brought them to the healing place that they're at now. So we've got to raise up the church to do that. So I'm going to end with this, because this is not something I ever promote. And all the times that I speak, even though it's the book of my life, I mean, how many people really want their whole life spread out in a book and everybody can read it? But the reason I am showing you this, well, first of all, my dear friend Pam wrote it. And when she said to me 17 years ago, bring me a vision, this is what ended up happening with it. But the reason I'm saying and showing this to you is that every penny that comes in from Bring Me a Vision goes directly to Rahab. Pam and I aren't in this to make any money. We've had a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, but we have risen above that, and our relationship has even deepened because of that. But I want people to know about this because it's going to help the women and the children that we serve at RAHAB Ministries. So I really appreciate, Pam, that you would allow us to do this here today, and hope that people will take advantage of having that book. I'm going to turn this over to Suzanne Lewis Johnson, but I just feel the need to pray. So can we just pray for just a moment? Father God, you're such a gracious God. You're so faithful. You're so caring. You're so loving. You're so true. Lord, I thank you that you love and care about these women and these little girls even more than we do. Father, if there's somebody in here today that feels nudged to reach out to help in some way, I just pray, Lord, that you're just tapping their heart right now. Or if there's somebody here today that knows somebody that needs the help that Rahab offers, that door will be open for them today, that they will no longer need to suffer, that we can bring them the true light and the true way of life, and that is through you, Jesus. I thank you for this church, for their hearts towards the broken. And Lord, I just thank you for all that you've done for me and for all the people that we serve at Rahab. And we bless you and we honor you in Jesus' name. Amen.
You can maybe see in that short glimpse introduction that you've had to Becky why it was so scary for me to leave the FBI and come to Rahab. What I realized is nobody would ever fill her shoes, and so I have not tried. Becky is still very much a part of RAHAB Ministries. She's still telling the story, and it was her obedience that this ministry was birthed out of 17 years ago, that one woman was obedient to what God called her to do, that she was willing to listen and go where he said to go. I believe every single one of us has a calling on our lives, and we just need to listen and be obedient. I believe that is true for every one of us here in this room. I also believe it's true for everyone that Rahab serves and everyone that we are called to serve. Did you know that in the NIV, I wasn't planning to mention this today, so I hope I get the answer or the number right. There are 74 mentions of the word prostitute in the Bible. That word is used in 3 ways. 1, it's part of the law. It's mentioned in the law. 2, God uses it an awful lot when he's talking about his own people. And that's the only time it's used in a derogatory sense. The third time that you will notice the word prostitute, you will see these stories of amazing women throughout Scripture who changed the course of history. God is in the business of using those whom worldly wisdom would say he's not going to use. So not only do I believe we can offer hope to the women that we're serving, but I believe they have incredible calls on their lives. I believe evil is a force. I served as an FBI agent for 10 years. Evil's a thing. Evil prowls around on this earth like a roaring lion, seeking to devour and to destroy. And I believe the enemy works the hardest to destroy those whom the Lord wants to use most profoundly. If you're sitting here today and you feel like the enemy is coming against you, if you feel like life is hard, if you felt like maybe it was hard to get out of bed this morning, maybe you're exactly where you're supposed to be, because maybe there's an enemy that's coming after you. Maybe it's not that you are nothing, but that you are something, that there is a God who created you with a giant calling and purpose. I believe that's true for every one of us sitting here. I believe that is true for the women and children that Rahab serves. I, as an FBI agent, was based out of the Stark County office. I had the opportunity to see things not everyone gets to see, to go places not everyone gets to go. What I saw was those stories that you will hear about overseas or in other places, those stories of people who are held by traffickers in captivity, sometimes physically, sometimes through the bonds of their minds. And we can talk a little about the tactics that traffickers use to enslave. Human trafficking is called the modern day slavery often. But I saw these stories, but they weren't just stories, they were people. I saw kids, I saw women who were crying out to God for someone to see them. It was a really hard place for me to be, and the Lord used that journey to bring me to Rahab. I had raised my right hand, and I had sworn an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution, which at its core, that was a promise to protect freedom in this country. And yet what I realized through exposure to Rahab and being able to see what was happening in the lives of these folks who were being trafficked was that I could do more by leaving the FBI and coming to Rahab. Because what I saw was what makes all the difference in the world is simply living the love of Christ and speaking the truth of Christ. These kids, these women were crying out for someone to see them, for someone to love them. I would read their private communications. I would read their journals. I would read their social media, private messages. That was part of my job. But I got to see what was going on in their hearts, and they were crying out to God. Where are you? Do you see me? And God sees them. God sees them through us. I believe the story of all of Scripture, the entire story, is God's story of setting his people free. I believe that's true in the physical, right? He parted the Red Sea to set his people free from slavery. And love and truth came down in the flesh, came down, took on flesh to set us free at Calvary spiritually. And so this work that Rahab does really at its core is we live out God's story of setting people free physically and spiritually by taking love and truth in the flesh and living it out on the streets, in strip clubs, drop-in centers, safe houses, all of those practical things that we do. Really what we're striving to do is just live the love of Christ so that for those women, for those children that I encountered before, they were looking for that freedom. You know what I'm talking about. If you found that freedom in Christ, the truth of your value, they need to know the truth of their value. We show that by physically meeting their needs, but also just living love to them. That is what sets people free. You know, if you look back to the beginning of time, you look back to the fall, you see that there was a snake that slithered up to one woman and took the truth just a little bit off track. And that is what took all of humanity into captivity. And that is exactly the tactic that traffickers use. You'll see these images, you'll see in the movies and the media, and even some of the ads that I think are meant to do good, but you see these images of people in chains and physical bondage, and that happens. I saw that in my cases. I saw it right here. In Stark County, it looks like that. People locked up, beat up, thrown in trunks, chained up, all those things happen. But it's not like, you know the viral social media posts about, I ran into this person at Target, and I think they were a trafficker that had a strange van, and watch out for that stranger at Target, or at the mall, or wherever it may be. Those things tend to go viral. If there was a trafficker waiting to snatch a child, that's so rare. I won't tell you that never happens, but that's not how traffickers operate. The tactic is the same. Evil's weapon is deception. So what traffickers do is they come in and they offer a counterfeit version of love. With social media these days especially, kids are posting their feelings online, their vulnerabilities. Traffickers prey on vulnerabilities. And so often it's just that need for love, for affection, and they will accept a counterfeit when they don't have the real thing. So not only is love and truth in the flesh the answer to stopping trafficking that's happening, it's also very much an answer to preventing it. I often say, we need to make sure there are no invisible people among us. That is what can prevent trafficking as well. But traffickers, they use that weapon of deception to manipulate, to groom, and that's what we have mostly seen in our backyard here, that a trafficker essentially can go shopping on the internet, can get on whatever the social media tool of the day is, and find women, children, sometimes even men, who are vulnerable, come in, offer a false version of love, make them feel that they're beautiful, that they're seen, and that they matter. All of those things are true, but it needs to be us, not the trafficker, showing them that. They need to get the real version, because what happens when it's a predator is it degrades over time until suddenly this boyfriend has now turned out this young boy or girl, or whoever the victim is in that instance, asking them to do sexual favors, and that's how it degrades. Nobody grows up wanting to be a prostitute, right? And if people were just being snatched off of the street and thrown into these situations, they would be picking up the phone and calling for help. But that's not what happens. So often those who are being trafficked don't even know that they are victims of trafficking. I had a case, the FBI considered it one of the top cases of 2014, that was a straight up slavery case. It was a forced labor case. And went to trial, 3-week trial. Subjects in that case were convicted of human trafficking. I say it was a labor case because sometimes people have a hard time understanding sex trafficking or having compassion on those who are being prostituted, but somehow look at labor trafficking differently. What I want you to know is there's only one difference between labor trafficking and sex trafficking, and that is the type of work that is required. And often it's intermixed. So I completely forgot where I was going with that because I went down another soapbox. Any idea where I was going with that, Pam? No? All right. So we have this conviction in that federal case, which I worked from the FBI office right here in Canton, law enforcement is so important. And RAHAB works in partnership with law enforcement. But for me, what I saw was, honestly, there was so much that was happening right here in our backyard. And that particular case hit national headlines, and people were horrified. How could something like this happen in Ohio? And I was horrified that they were horrified, because what I knew was that was the tip of the iceberg. What hits the media is the tip of the iceberg. And at RAHAB, we know that. Last year alone, with our drop-in center that's in downtown Akron, we served more than 570 women who were either trafficked or at very high risk. Through our partnership with Restore Court, that is the only Ohio Supreme Court certified juvenile human trafficking docket in the state. What that means is, in Summit County, every child who comes into the juvenile justice system is screened for indicators of human trafficking. They can be put on this alternative docket where their charges go away if they complete the records, wiped away, if they complete all of the requirements on that docket. We served 44 kids. If you think about that number, that's 44 kids who not only came into the system, but then who were identified as needing to be part of this human trafficking docket. You go down the list and they meet these red flags. Well, how many of them were not identified for the docket? How many never came into the system at all? And yet there were 44 kids who were identified in that way in Summit County alone. Last year we served 20 women through our adult safe house, and we now have a juvenile safe house that opened earlier this year. And we have 5 children living there right now. These numbers, the adult house, the juvenile house, those include folks who are coming from Stark County. The safe houses aren't even actually in Summit County. So while our offices are in Summit County, RAHAB serves a much wider area. In Stark County, doors are just opening to us. My heart is very much here because of the needs that I saw here, because most of those women and children whom I encountered who were being trafficked were in Stark County or somehow connected to Stark County. And so we do know, and I don't think it's any surprise to you, that there's a need in this county. And so what we're seeing is just the Lord's raising up an army. We have an outreach director who started leading teams. Some of you may even be a part of street outreach teams and outreach to strip clubs. And the next piece that we need here in Stark County is a drop-in center, just like what we have in Akron. We have hospitals actually who have been asking us, as they're identifying women, can we send them to, we have hospitals down here who are asking if they can send them up to Akron, which of course they can, but transportation and things are hard, and they would be much more likely to come in our doors here in Canton. One of the questions I often receive is, well, where are the spots? Like, where are the spots that we should avoid if we want to protect our children? And I would say, certainly there are places where there's more street prostitution in Stark County, but the traffickers are everywhere. The customers are everywhere, and I'll often say the most dangerous place for your child to be is in their bedroom with their phone or their computer, because as I said, those traffickers are able to go on there and it's almost like shopping, because they can find these kids with vulnerabilities. I'm so thankful that you are here, that you care, that we've been invited, that the church really, I believe, is rising up in Stark County. Not just Stark County. We've had incredible opportunities in a lot of places, but more than anywhere, I just see this swell of people who are called to be part of this work, to be a voice, to be engaged on the streets. I want to open it up to you if you have questions. I'm told I have a lot of soapboxes, so I could stand up here for another hour and just go get on my other soapboxes, but I would really love, I think there probably are folks who have different levels of exposure to RAHAB, to the issue of trafficking. So if I've jumped around, just ask me any questions, or Cam as well. I think we'd be happy to answer questions. You have another mic, so that you're getting the information that would really be helpful to you.
So when you identify primarily young women who need what you have to offer, what is it that you're trying to accomplish, and how do you go about doing it?
So one of my soapboxes is, what is the definition of success, which I think is what you're honing in on there. And while I have said that I believe we all have these callings, and I want to give everyone we serve the opportunity to fulfill that calling, for me, what I believe is the definition of success is simply living Christ to our neighbor. So we want to give them that opportunity, but we want to love them no matter what. And when you think about the incredible trauma, like, this is a long road. In fact, I was meeting with a pastor when I first came on board who's really been invested a long time with RAHAB, and we were talking about the safe house. And we were talking about women leave. They leave the safe house. We don't hold them there. They come by choice and they leave if they want to leave. And that's because sometimes safe doesn't feel safe. When you've lived in that state of trauma, fight or flight and all that stuff, and then you're in this place that's supposed to be safe, but maybe it doesn't feel that way, and then we have a lot of times folks who are coming in with a drug addiction, which if they didn't start out with a drug addiction as a vulnerability that the trafficker preyed upon, oftentimes the trafficker will get them addicted to the drugs because that's a great way to control somebody. And so there can be that craving and all the chemical changes in the brain, just so many reasons that it's very hard to stay at a place that is safe and where you're getting the wraparound trauma-informed care. So something that's unique about RAHAB actually is someone can leave and then we welcome them back, because that's what the Lord does for us, right? It's a culture of grace. And so ultimately, I don't know if I'm answering your question at all because I got on my soapbox again, but ultimately our goal is to walk alongside them forever, to have a real relationship, because what we believe is relationship truly is the intervention. There's a lot of things we can do. It looks different in different areas. It looks different in safe housing than it looks in street outreach, but the DNA of RAHAB all comes back to the same thing. It all comes back to real relationship and really actually showing what real love is. And that's why I believe, sometimes it'll take years and it'll take maybe involvement in different types of programming before we see what's defined as success in worldly terms. But we're also not striving necessarily for those that we serve to have what I often call white picket fence lives. This is yet another soapbox of mine if anyone wants to ask about white picket fence lives. My goal is to do absolutely everything that we can to provide for basic needs and to give them the opportunity to fulfill their callings.
So in your ideal world, what would be our next step?
Well, we have this campaign that's kicking off on November 1st to celebrate the 5-year anniversary of our safe house. And this would actually be the first time I've ever asked. I've mentioned that development and fundraising is an opportunity, but this is a really big deal for us. That we are kicking off this campaign on November 1st called Multiply Hope. And what we're trying to do is really build up a base of committed monthly donors. And we need to spread the word about that. The Lord has been so amazing in the ways He's provided for RAHAB, but we have these doors that are open to us now. Our number one need is prayer. Our greatest tangible need after that is financial support. And so when this campaign launches, if you could watch for that, and if you could just spread the word, if everybody in here could find 10 people who would be able to give $55 a month is the target, because that comes from our 5-year anniversary, but anything at all that folks are able to give so that we are able to grow and sustain this ministry that we're doing would be huge. The education piece is huge. So prayer is number one. Greatest tangible need is money. I used to feel like if I was giving money, I wasn't doing enough. I don't know if anybody feels like that. But we truly need it. So we would be grateful if you would engage in that way. And then to learn, we have what's called RAHAB Essentials training, where if you are feeling called to be part of this ministry in a way where you would be directly serving the women and the children, serving trafficking survivors, we would ask you to come to that training so that you can really be equipped. It's a 6-hour training where we do human trafficking 101, we do trauma training, we give an overview of every area of our ministry so that you can really see and then pray about what the place might be for you to engage.
It seems obvious to me that your primary goal is to have them have an encounter with Jesus. But if you have an encounter with Jesus, you ought to get introduced to his family. How does the church, how do you integrate these ladies into safe church communities? Does it happen?
So the drop-in center, and we have a minor mentoring center too, where those are places where they can come to Bible studies. I actually say that RAHAB is the church. I know what you're talking about as well, to connect to houses of worship. So with our safe houses, we give the opportunity to attend churches and provide transportation for that piece.
But how are they received?
I've actually never heard of any concerns as far as how they're received. They're generally going to churches where we have relationships, and so I think they're welcomed with love, as they should be. But that's a great question, because they don't know, if they wandered in here, they'd be greeted with love. But what if somebody wandered in on their own to a different church? They're coming in those doors typically with somebody.
Question, what is the reception reaction to the regulatory bodies, Stark County, the councils, the judicial system to your work, as well as coming from the mindset of if there's a problem, you fix it kind of thing. And so is there education you give to the governing bodies of the county and the judicial system? I mean, you were part of some of that. How's it received in Akron, of course, but working more in Stark County? How's that work?
I knew a lot of folks in those systems before I came to RAHAB, so there's a continuation of relationships. There have also been new relationships. There's a couple task forces in Stark County that are comprised of folks who provide direct services or who are likely to encounter those who are being trafficked. And so the courts, children's services, different agencies are part of those and I've been part of those too for years and years. And so part of my experience and my journey that brought me to RAHAB actually was kind of born out of those relationships, where there I was, as an FBI agent. If you watch TV, the FBI swoops in and saves the day. That's not the reality in every instance. Only God is all powerful and all knowing. The Bureau is not, so as good as that piece was, I would constantly find myself in these spaces where I was getting called and we'd identified someone who was being trafficked, who was maybe had a case with children's services or had a case in one of the courts here in Stark County. And constantly RAHAB was looked to as the answer. With juveniles, at that time, the juvenile safe house wasn't open yet because there wasn't enough funding. And so constantly I would be going to meetings and people would say, is the RAHAB safe house open yet? And so what would happen then is these kids would end up in somewhere like maybe detention, or more likely, normally they just ended up back out there getting snatched up by the same trafficker or a different trafficker. And so that was really motivating for me. So it was a great relationship with those entities who were looking for Rahab to be the answer, and this door opened for me to go to Rahab and to be able to speak the things that I'm speaking now and say the community needs to see that need. And so there was all I've experienced so far really is partnership with those entities, and have been asked to come in and train, and we learn from one another too. I'm learning from those entities in the community, not just coming in and getting on my soapbox the whole time.
Another question. You mentioned the safe house several times, and if you are successful with a young woman in the safe house, what does she graduate to? What's the next step after that?
I've had the amazing opportunity of going to some safe house graduations since I've come onto staff, and in those instances, what had happened is the women had come in, everyone gets an individualized case plan. So that includes trauma-informed therapies, it includes maybe education and job skills. And so in those instances, the women came out with a plan. They came out with employment, they came out with, they had started working actually before they left the safe house, so they've been able to save up money and buy a car and do the normal things that we do in life that maybe we take for granted. But they had come out equipped to do that, and then they don't graduate and just go off on their way, but we continue to support and have relationship with them, and they have mentors who continue to walk alongside them.
I have a question. So those who are doing the trafficking, when they see the girls, seeking help or going to a safe house, do they actively try and prevent that? And is there a fear factor of leaving that trafficking group because of either fear of some kind of repercussion, either to themselves or to those who are still there?
Yeah, there's a lot of fear for a lot of reasons. We haven't had any issues though with traffickers seeking out or finding the safe house. Do you want to talk at all about like the trauma bonds? Okay. Yep, so it's complicated.
Yeah. Now there's something called a trauma bond, and you might read about it and hear about it in different places. So there is this connection with the trafficker and the victim, and they want to be free and they don't want to be free. It's kind of like Paul, Romans 7, want to and not want to. And that's why what Rahab does is so important in all the avenues and the ways that they intersect with them. And I know she hasn't mentioned, but I know that they go in and talk to schools. They've talked to hospitals so that hospitals are aware of what victims who are coming into emergency rooms might be looking like. They go into the jails. When you were looking at what's a success model, pre-safe house, a success model is a young woman that Becky met in jail who gave her life to the Lord and had a lot of rough spots. She'd been on the street a long time. And today, what's her official title?
She's at the drop-in center.
She's over the drop-in center, and today she's reaching all of these women who come to the drop-in center because it's a real life story worked out in her. Mm-hmm. And I would say, having spent time in private practice, but then serving on a church staff, and this is my soapbox, that the church is behind. The church is behind. Because we look at it as not as common as it is, and because we're more comfortable with being with each other than we are with those who don't look like us, who may not dress like us, who may not have the manners that we do, who may not smell like us, who may be different than we are. And I think that's what my prayer is that the church would in fact recognize the ways that they can serve, whether it's volunteering, where you're turning in all kinds of opportunities, whether it's on the streets, or whether it's writing thank you notes, or whether it's sorting clothes and things that are brought in, or whatever it is. There are lots of opportunities, and it's needed in every way. So, and the trauma therapy is real, and it's costly. When we talk about money, it's costly. Not every counselor knows how to deal with somebody who's experienced trauma, because it's a long, complicated process. When I say long, I'm saying years. Years. Because there are triggers and flashbacks and cues, and all of that keeps playing and playing and playing. Thankfully, I think from my point of view as a professional who was also a believer, first and foremost, he's the only one who can really set that whole situation free for them.
I think I'm about at the end of my time here, but I wanted to share with you too about the podcast, which is something new. If you haven't seen that, if you go to the website, rahabministries.org, under media, we have 4 podcasts that are out there now, and Angel's story is on there. Angel was the first one who was interviewed there, and we really believe we are called to have a voice and to speak truth. That not every piece of information that is out there about trafficking is completely accurate. So what we're trying to do is have conversations that will be helpful to the narrative so that we can help equip others to do this work that I had nothing to do with. I really believe there is nothing like Rahab anywhere, but it needs to be everywhere. I can say that because I had nothing to do with creating it. I just got to show up at this pivotal time and get on my soapbox and support the work that's already going. But I would love it if you're on social media, if you would please follow Rahab, share the podcast so that we can have that voice and share good, accurate information. But most of all, if you would pray, because this work is built on prayer. It is God's work, it is not our work, and I have seen him time and time and time again part the Red Sea. Over my last year at this ministry, there are things that looked impossible, and he is the God who does the impossible. And we are thankful for the times that we have needed miracles, because that's when you get to see them. So we hope that we trust they will continue. So please be praying for us for that.
Jane, I want to thank you for the way that you've influenced me and Pam. This is, we got a chance to witness you coming to Christ. We got a chance to see the transformation, even though we haven't known you very long. We've watched the way that God has affected your life. But you have a passion for this before you knew Jesus. And like, Christians aren't the only ones that have concern about people that are being trafficked, right? Like, here is an opportunity for us, and I think you and I need to talk. But here's an opportunity for us to be able to identify, first of all, that it's an opportunity to intersect the world. Not only those that are affected by the trafficking, but those who are, who in their heart want to see it come to an end, whether they know Jesus or not. Because those folks need Jesus too. I would like to think that for the years that this place has existed, that we've understood that Jesus came full of grace and truth for all people, period. God forgive us if we give off a vibe that tells people you're not good enough to be here. If that's the case, I'm not good enough to be here either. I'm going to close this with a word of prayer. But please understand, we love you. We love the ministry that you guys are all collectively involved with. It's always been fascinating to me when you look at the list of those who are listed in the legacy of Christ in Matthew. There are powerful women that are part of that legacy that God has called out of those dark places.
I think they ought to get here in the middle and just pray around them, eh?
Yeah, so you better surround them before they go.
Come on up.
Yeah.
We listen to the Spirit of God. We listen to the voices of people who are listening to the Spirit of God. So if you guys are good with it, if you're not, okay, but if you're good with it, just come right up here. Yeah, please. Lord God, so much of what this ministry is dealing with is the violation and inappropriate way that people take advantage of each other, including inappropriate touch. God, I pray that today that the laying on of hands that's happening would be a holy touch, empowering touch, one where these ladies experience and know that your Spirit, first and foremost, is the driving force behind what they're working at. That the rest of us listen and listen close to see what it is that you might be calling us to get involved, at what level you're calling us to get involved. It's not if, but at what level you're calling us to get involved. God, my heart breaks when I hear even one story. When I've heard the audible books that have talked about even one story, it is heart-wrenching and it's heartbreaking. Somehow these ladies have heard these stories over and over and over and continue to go back to work. So continue to build them up. Continue to make this life-giving for them. And today, God, break the bounds of this destructive stuff for at least one more person. May you call one more person out of this darkness. I pray, God, that Satan would be exposed for the deception. I pray that people would begin to find comfort in places that they ought to find comfort. That the safe houses would actually begin to feel safe in their soul, even if it's something they've never known before. I know the enemy is going to continue to whisper to them that they cannot trust those who are trying to actually lift them out of this place. Lord, I pray that you would expose to those who are trapped in this world, expose to them where the lie is coming from. Open their eyes, let them see it. And where the truth is coming from. Jesus came full of grace and truth. May they experience the grace and truth. And God, I just ask forgiveness for your people, for the times when we as your church body have failed, and failed miserably. Get us out of the ivory towers. May we walk where you call us to walk. We just pray this in Jesus' name.